things theology. We chop it up properly without an apology. Gotta give that apology to God, hollow because this is how we do it at All Things Theology.
Yo, grace and peace. We are here for a premiere to talk about the David Taylor bond hearing. Again, I want to listen to it together. So it's going to be quite a lengthy video. Some of you have been asking, where's the long videos? Well, here you go. You stick around to the end, right? So we're going to listen to this bond hearing together. And I want to give some commentary along the way because there's some quite interesting things that were said and some actual news that developed. This is a sick case. I'll just say that. But you're going to hear that from yourself, okay? So, yeah. So, look, I just want to share my screen. We're going to get right into it. Yeah, let's listen to this. By the way, Cult DET, good channel I've been following, presented this. So, look, we definitely want to follow this case as much as we are allowed to see from the court. But let's listen to this bond hearing together.
2520560, United States of America versus David Taylor.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Sarah Cohen appearing on behalf of the United States.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Scott Rosenblum appearing for Pastor David Taylor.
Okay, good afternoon. Mr. Taylor, can you please approach and state your name for the record?
David Taylor.
Okay, thank you. Today is the date set and time for an arraignment and a detention hearing. Let's do the arraignment first. Mr. Taylor, did you get a copy of the indictment?
Yes.
Okay, you need to speak in the microphone.
Yes,
okay.
Your Honor.
Now, I want David Taylor to so bad say Marvelous power. You know, there's a different David Taylor when it comes to these trials. He's not as explosive and as bold as he presents himself, as we've seen from his interrogations. But nevertheless, that's going to be like the only time you hear him speak. So you do know David Taylor is present during this bond hearing, but mostly going to be the lawyers kind of arguing out and the judge giving some statements here and there. But this is the judge right now speaking. I'll let you guys know who's also speaking as we go along.
Okay. I do have in front of me an acknowledgement, and it's signed by you and your lawyer. Is that right?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. And this document states what you have been charged with and the maximum penalties you could face if you are convicted or plead guilty. You've been charged in this indictment with count 1, conspiracy to commit forced labor in violation of 18 U.S.C. section 1594. That carries a potential maximum penalty of 20 years imprisonment and a fine of up to $250,000. Counts 2 through 9 charge you with a violation of 18 U.S.C. section 1589, which is forced labor. Each of those counts carries a potential maximum penalty of 20 years imprisonment and a fine of up to $250,000 on each count. You've also been charged in count 10 of this indictment with conspiracy to commit money laundering in violation of 18 U.S.C. section 1956. That also carries a potential maximum penalty of 20 years imprisonment, a fine of up to $500,000, or twice the value of the properties involved in the money laundering transactions. You also need to understand that the court could impose consecutive sentences if you are convicted of more than one count.
So let me explain some of that. So generally in court cases where somebody is deemed guilty and they're convicted of like two things, the charges run congruent. So let's say you have a charge, you're convicted of that's 20 years, and another charge that's 5 years. Generally, they don't run those together. They're just served together. So you only do the 20 years. Now, what this judge is saying, if you are convicted of more than one charge, so at least a minimum of two of these three charges right now that are being presented, David Taylor could face them consecutively, meaning they would go against another. So let's say for two of those, let's say he's found guilty of two of those charges and he's faced a maximum of 20 each. Rather than that running congruently where it's just 20 years, David Taylor could be facing up to 40 years in prison. Now, again, if you add a third charge where he gets convicted of a maximum 2, that could be up to 60 years in prison. We will see what will happen, but just explaining this legal point the judge is presenting. So, wow, that was insane. That's crazy. Crazy, a long time to be in prison.
Mr. Taylor, do you understand what you've been charged with in this indictment and the maximum penalties you could face?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Counsel, are you ready to enter a plea?
Yes, Your Honor. We'll waive the formal reading of the indictment and enter a plea of not guilty to each count.
Okay.
So that the man is David Taylor's lawyer, and that's him saying he's not guilty to the charges being presented, right? He'll have a day in court, right? But just letting you know what's going on here.
I will enter a plea of not guilty on each count, and the record will reflect that Mr. Taylor has now been arraigned on the indictment. So the next matter is the detention hearing. And before the government starts its proffer, I just want to put on the record that in advance of this, I've reviewed not only the indictment, but I've also reviewed the memorandum that the government filed in support of detention. I've also reviewed defendant's memorandum in opposition to detention that have been filed, as well as, obviously, the reports of pretrial services, both from this district and the one that was prepared in the district where he made his initial appearance. So just so you know what I have reviewed, and I am also familiar with the proceedings with the co-defendant. So go ahead.
That's Michelle Brandon.
Thank you, Your Honor. With that recognition by the court, the government.
And this is the state. This is the government. This is the lawyer who's presenting to evidence to deem or to, presenting the evidence so that he could be found guilty. So this is not David Taylor's lawyer. This is not the judge, but the prosecutor, right? All right. We'll keep listening.
Argument today and factual proffer will be limited. As the court is well aware, Taylor is charged with forced labor, and Congress requires a presumption of detention. This presumption reflects Congress's substantive judgment that particular classes of offenders should ordinarily be detained prior to trial, such as David Taylor. It is the government's argument that the defendant will not meet its burden of production. However, if the court finds otherwise, the government's argument today will focus on 3142 factors, beginning with the nature and circumstances of the charged offenses. According to the evidence presented to the grand jury and reviewed by this court, David Taylor was a self-proclaimed general of
self-proclaimed.
a very unusual and brutal regime. And he was, according to the evidence, a serial sadist. And that is
now they're going to get back to this, I guess, laying out what more this sadist mean. Now, some of you guys may know it's sadist, and so you may be asking the question, what was he doing for, causing pain for gratification? Well, they're going to get into that, but I'm going to allow the lawyer here to present this.
No exaggeration. For 11 years, in 4 states, over a decade, he terrorized and traumatized workers with violence, threats of violence, sleep deprivation, medical deprivation, and food deprivation.
Wow.
Contrary to the defense brief, victims and witnesses will testify that David Taylor, defendant number 2, Michelle Brannon, and others in the organization, including some who are sitting in the courtroom today, assaulted others in the organization, including, to date, at least 1 minor who has come forward.
Wow.
Specifically, witnesses thus far who have been willing to come forward have reported that approximately 10 members who have assaulted other people within the organization. Because of the nature of the public proceeding, the government is not going to identify those people at this time, but there are approximately 10, again, including some seated in this courtroom today. Victims and witnesses will also testify that they were deprived of food, sleep, and medical care. Their testimony is corroborated, overwhelmingly, by Taylor's orders and threats to his victims that have been documented. For the record, the government is going to place some of those threats directly from Taylor into the record, notably with the times. Beginning on just 1 at 12:26 a.m., Taylor texted
So now this is going to be her reading some of the threats that David Taylor has sent to the group members. So that's what she's going to be reading. We'll allow her to present those.
Armor bearer, as the court knows, an armor bearer is Taylor's personal slave. He instructed the armor bearer as follows: you'll have to raise $164,000 today. To clarify, the armor bearer was responsible for passing on that order to the workers. Each hour you will fall behind, consequences will start. We will mess with the food. You will fast from the regular food or abstain for a while.
Mess with the food is crazy.
Those who do not push in their calls individually and as a team with the right amount of people and closing numbers at 6 p.m., they don't eat dinner at all. They might get a snack before bed, but not much. And this regiment will go on every day for 21 days until they obey. Take away the food. Exclamation point, exclamation point. There will be other consequences. We must make them fast and pray.
Make them fast.
Another one at 3:55 a.m. Taylor texted the same armor bearer. Those in the top 9 that don't do well will stay up and close and stay on top of the delinquents. Put the pressure on them for not having their time off. Nor food. They will fast.
Now, these are extreme cult tactics that's being performed by David Taylor. You mess with someone's food, sleep, medical conditions, and there becomes the ingredients for a cult leader. And also, you also see this in cults where she just read, where the top leaders actually start to perform the actions of the cult leader to the lower peoples. We saw this with what's the African guy? I forget his name. Anyways, this is often done in cults as well, where the top performing people in the cult start to emulate the cult leader and start to bully, assault, starve, all those kind of things as well. So that was an interesting thing to note there.
At 3:52 a.m. on another date, Taylor texted his armor bearer, "Let everyone know we have to raise at least $50,000 by 12 midnight if this happens. The top 9 and those who did well can rest, but the others who didn't will stay up until 4 a.m. and study notes.
Oh, wow.
And they will wake up at 8 to 9.
Wow.
And if they don't do good the first 5 hours, they will not get lunch." On another date, 7:57 a.m., there is evidence of consequences when people are sleeping and are having a hard time waking up. He texts his armor bearer, "Pour water on everyone's faces that's halfway sleeping and not working. Wake them up now. My next level of judgment tomorrow is that it won't be just 4 a.m. It will be every hour you waste in the day will be added on past 4 a.m. In all capital letters, tell them all to stand now and you throw water on their faces." Later in the text, you tell them I don't care about them being sick.
Wow.
On another date at 3:23 a.m., Taylor texted to his armor bearer, "I can't be kind to you letting you start later and sleep in. I can't be kind with none of you.
Can't be kind.
You're all working until 4 a.m. Now, I don't care if you're tired. You've crossed the line. You're going to work all night and get up in the morning."
Now, again, sorry for the interruption again, but you just see the characteristics. A pastor, a shepherd, is supposed to be gentle with the flock, emulating the humility of the characteristics of Christ. But David Taylor is just a bully. He's mean. Matter of fact, I've done numerous videos saying these things even before I knew of this information. This only just tells how deep those things were.
In another text, Taylor texted a group of workers, "You're not going to bed tonight until you raise $33,000.
Sick.
And as the court knows, the $33,000 and all the other money that Taylor is insisting being raised is not for the benefit of the community.
To him.
It is for the benefit of David Taylor
That's
and
right.
Michelle Brannon.
That's right.
On another date at 1:44 a.m., Taylor texted a group of workers in capital letters, point blank, "If you don't work, you can't eat." On another date, Taylor texted a group of workers, warning to the whole staff in capital letters, "If you don't work and learn closing like we told you, then you won't eat." There are more. They are in the brief, and there are more in evidence. In addition to the threats that are corroborated by victims and witnesses, FBI agents are now investigating even more disturbing evidence, in addition to the forced labor. There's evidence now that Taylor coerced some female workers into providing masturbation videos and sexually explicit photographs to Taylor. The female members who have disclosed this to the government to date explain that Taylor demanded this material, that they were fearful of disobeying him, and they felt they had no choice but to send Taylor what he demanded from them.
Now, this is where you're going to start to find some more of just David's inhumane, sick behavior, right? And it is just pure just sick what this man did.
Reacting to their nastiness. You nasty.
And so that's what we're about to hear. So I just want you to listen to the new evidence being presented in regards to David Taylor and these female workers.
In addition, minors have come forward to the FBI. They have been recently interviewed. They have corroborated the forced labor scheme, including physical assaults. They have reported their own psychological and physical abuse and their own trauma during their involvement in Taylor's organization.
Wow.
By Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Okay.
Or instructed by Mr. Taylor. The serious nature and circumstances of the charged forced labor, as well as the newly developing evidence, as well as the money laundering detailed in the government's brief, unquestionably weigh in favor of detention. Moving on to the weight of the evidence, the danger Taylor poses is particularly insidious. Congress, of course, recognized this danger in designating forced labor as a presumption of detention case. But there's more than just forced labor. Taylor faces a strong incentive to flee, particularly because of the sentencing guidelines and the statutory maximum penalty. Putting aside the 20-year maximum penalty for a moment, the government's initial estimated calculation for the forced labor charges is 151 to 188 months, and his guideline range for money laundering is similar, 151 to 188 months. It's important that we all understand that forced labor is not just about physical assaults and physical abuse. It is about the psychological trauma and coercion that occurs. And this was happening on a daily basis for over a decade. So to remove David Taylor from the organization is not enough. The fear persists
Agreed.
for his victims.
Agreed.
Not just because he's physically removed. The psychological fear and the psychological trauma continues. The history and characteristics of the defendant. He has no employment outside KOGGC. He does not have significant family or community ties to this district. And while it is true that he has no prior criminal convictions, he has admitted publicly and in messages that he used to be a gangster in his teenage years, very bad in shootouts, etc.
Oh, that part cracked me up because it's like David Taylor's own message is coming back against him. So she's trying to say why he shouldn't be released. Well, she's saying, well, he's a flight risk. And David Taylor has admitted to literally committing felonies on camera, that he was involved in shootouts and that he was a gangster, selling drugs, doing drugs, gangster activity. So I thought this part was comical in a sense that I don't actually believe David Taylor was involved in gangs and shootouts and maybe drugs. Okay. But not I just don't see that. Right. And, because guess what? A gangster without any criminal history is just crazy. But I thought it was a bit comical that this came up in her past. So they've been doing their research, right? Yeah. I could have gave you clips for that, FBI.
So apparently, prior to this forced labor sinister organization that he decided to start, he was involved with violent behavior. And then it's important that the court recognizes that he doesn't have any criminal convictions because he was engaging in a criminal enterprise that was extraordinarily sealed
Right.
for the past 12 years.
Exactly.
In addition to the lack of legitimate ties to this district, the government's financial investigation, which importantly remains ongoing, establishes that Taylor has numerous sources of funds to flee, as detailed in our brief. In addition, the government has just recently learned that Taylor has another source of funds. So this is a source that is not identified in the government's brief. He has a additional cashback debit card account that currently has $12,195.10 in it, and he has an online savings account that has $130,910.23 in it.
He got all those accounts, secret accounts.
If the court has any questions about access to funds or the seizure of funds, Adriana Didel, the chief of our office's money laundering and asset recovery unit, is here to answer the court's questions. Okay. The government also pointed out in its brief that the funds will continue to grow based upon the conduct of people in the courtroom because they are actively soliciting additional funds. And the manner in which they are doing it is quite frightening. For example, in a broadcast recently, members of the organization stated, quote, "We're in a war. We're in a war, and it's time for you to decide if you're a warrior or you're not."
Now, she's making reference to the current YouTube channel that's still in operation while this trial is going on. And they're like addressing this stuff still, which is crazy. David's in persecution. Yeah. Using war type language to describe this. And she's bringing that up.
Moving on to the nature and seriousness of the danger to any person or the community. In addition to the intimidating forced labor conspiracy that is discussed in great detail in the government's brief, as the government has noted, there's developing evidence that Taylor coerced women to provide him sexually explicit videos and pictures.
Crazy.
His sexual predation alone makes him a danger to the community for several reasons. First, it is very apparent to investigators that Taylor has an excessive need for sexual gratification, and it will not be controlled with bond conditions. Because Taylor collected these sexually explicit materials electronically, this material may be in the possession of current members of the organization or former members, or may be stored by Taylor in unknown locations. Women remain fearful that Taylor or someone at his direction will distribute this very private, explicit, and sensitive material.
So essentially what she's saying there is that David Taylor, all the videos that was sent to him by these women doing explicit things, he kept them. And these women are in fear due to being in this cult and the manipulation they probably experienced for years, that David Taylor will kind of do some kind of revenge and share them along other members. And so, yeah, that can be a very embarrassing thing. But it's all this kind of stuff is just like little games the cult leader plays to continue keeping them in, right? And so that's essentially what she's talking about.
As detailed in the government's brief, also, during Taylor's meetings and online broadcasts, he uses words like war and battle. He claims he's preparing soldiers. He calls himself a general.
Marvellic.
And he describes how he's training the end army.
Marvellic army.
His members are entitled to protest, Your Honor. But as I speak here now, they're outside the courthouse. And that should be noted. They are carrying on their war message, even as I speak. It is important to note as well that one member of the organization who has been attending court proceedings did interfere with the government providing assistance to victims of this organization. Specifically, on August 27th, victim witness services were present in Tampa when the search warrant was executed. There were nonprofit organizations present as well. These were victim services personnel who were offering help to victims, food, medical care, a phone, whatever they needed. And there were victims who wanted the help. And a person within this organization, a high-level person, a person who admitted that he was number 3 in the organization, who is sitting in the courtroom today, came to that location and convinced those people to leave and not get help. That's the kind of organization that we're dealing with.
Wow.
In addition, Taylor himself and others at his direction have threatened, harassed, and stalked members, either at their indication that they wanted to leave the organization or after they left. Just recently, the government has received descriptions of people, from people, who want us to know the kind of harassing activity that occurs. So there are people out there that are very concerned about David Taylor being released into the community and the kind of harassing and stalking that will occur by him or anyone at his direction. So given Taylor's reign of terror over his victims, his leadership role, his loyal following, and now his sexual exploitation of women, and his evangelizing of violence and obstruction and defiance of law enforcement, Taylor would clearly be a danger to the community if released. Moving on to the recommendation by pretrial services. Pretrial services recommended bond. So at this time, I'm going to explain why the bond conditions are absolutely and wholly inappropriate. With regard to the bond address, the Ocala House is a formal location of the forced labor. The North Carolina address is where David Taylor was arrested. Contrary to his statements to pretrial services in North Carolina, he has been living at that location for approximately 5 years. There's an individual referenced in the pretrial services report. I can state his name on the record if the court wishes, but for now...
Well, if it's stated in the pretrial services report, I think it's fine. Go ahead.
Thank you. Paul Adom, A-D-O-M.
Right.
Taylor has referred to him as floor manager and stated that he is responsible for driving everyone and keeping order. He runs an organization called Kingdom Restoration for All Nations, which is in Durham, North Carolina. It
that
is
ain't him.
directly next to the house where Taylor was arrested. Adom's organization and Taylor's organization have been financially entwined. And I can get into the details if the court wishes, but suffice it to say that there is money going back and forth. And that money has been going back and forth for many years. Adom was in Houston, Texas when the search warrants were executed on August 27th. He was there with his wife. And they had a room. So they are both members of the organization. Moving on to another individual, Alyssa Billow is also known as Alyssa Kay. She was interviewed on August 27th. She said that the Edgewick house is Paul's house. And she also stated to law enforcement that that house was used to house male members of the organization when they came to North Carolina. It's also important to note that an apartment nearby that address is leased under defendant number 2's name, and it has been used to house female members when they travel to North Carolina. And specifically, 2 members of the organization were staying at that nearby apartment. Regarding the defendant's son, like defendant 2's son, is a member of the organization. In fact, his son is listed as director in KOGGC documents.
So they're talking about David Taylor's son, and I think also Michelle Brandon's son are involved in their ministry. We'll be, kind in our description. And so that's very interesting. And David Taylor's son is the director of the church there.
So he is a member as well. I referenced Alyssa Billow, also known as Alyssa Kay, and her statements regarding the address in North Carolina. But with regard to her having contact with KOGGC, she is a member of the organization as well. Specifically, she's been living with Taylor, and she's been instructing his workers in the manner described by the government today and in our brief. She serves Taylor, much like an armor bearer does, but she's female, so I will leave it at that. She also has control over Taylor's personal accounts and assets. Another individual in the courtroom, and also suggested by pretrial services to take care of David Taylor, is his armor bearer. As we described in our briefing, an armor bearer is Taylor's 24/7 servant.
Slave.
And for the record, 2 other armor bearers are victims in counts 8 and 9 of the indictment. They do whatever Taylor orders them to do. That's their job, and that's what they've been trained to do. And this has included over the years everything, literally everything, including transporting women to have sex with David Taylor and to give the women Plan B contraceptives.
So as you can clearly see, there are other people involved in this organization, cult-like organization. Even his armor bearers knew, participated. You can see they gave these women Plan B pills. Crazy.
Gwen also has knowledge of Taylor's accounts and assets, and he corresponds with other members daily on behalf of Taylor. Notably, as pointed out in the government's brief, but I'll highlight some additional inaccuracies in the pretrial services report. And these inaccuracies are the result of David Taylor's lies to pretrial services. He has never been an honest person. We know that from the criminal activity. Yeah. But when faced with court proceedings and the serious nature of court proceedings, he couldn't be honest with pretrial services. He stated that he was living in St. Louis when he wasn't. He's been in North Carolina for many years. Daniel Gwynn has been Taylor's armor bearer, not merely a caretaker or a friend. Notably, David Taylor told pretrial services that he was with KOGGC for a specific amount of time, but as described in the government's brief, before KOGGC, Taylor ran JMMI, and he has run both of those organizations for much longer than the mere 8 years that he admitted to pretrial services. And notably, one of the reasons he changed the name is because JMMI lost its nonprofit status.
They lost that tax status. Nonprofit no more.
I'm not sure why David Taylor left out additional international travel. Of course, lacking a passport will prevent international travel, but again, just pointing out his dishonesty that he does not admit to all of his international travel. And of course, his financial disclosure is far from accurate based upon the sources of funds to flee that's highlighted in the government's brief, and notably the additional money that the government was notified of today. David Taylor told pretrial services that he merely had one personal checking account with a very minimal amount of money in it. But as described in the government's brief and today, David Taylor has access to a wide range of different funds. And as in any complicated and purposeful hiding of assets, there will be additional sources that the government has not yet located. And again, Adriana Didal can discuss that with the court if the court wishes.
She said we're going to find some more accounts.
And the last thing to note for the record, as I'm sure this court is aware, is that although defendant number 2 is on bond, Her condition imposed by Judge Berg was that she have absolutely no contact with any individuals, former or current, in the organization, and
She's
none
talking
of the
about-
funds can support her manner of living in any way.
You're talking about Michelle Brennan when they defer to defendant number 2. That's Michelle Brennan, by the way.
So that the recommendation of pretrial services in this case doesn't even match defendant number 2's bond conditions. Of course, it is the government's position, as discussed in the brief and today, that absolutely no condition of bond is appropriate in this case, and the defendant should be detained.
Thank you. Counsel.
Thank you. May it please the court, Your Honor. I'm trying to.
All right, so this is now David Taylor's lawyer. Now, I got to say this. He's going to respond to some of the things, and a lot of it is going to make you upset, angry. Now, cut some guy some slack. He's been hired to David Taylor to get him off or the least amount of time. So just understand that too. He is trying to do a job that this man probably thinks David Taylor is a slime ball, crazy, right? He probably doesn't have the best thoughts of David Taylor, but he has signed under an oath to defend even the worst of the worst. So, hey, give him a break, but you can still be mad. That's all I'm saying.
Sort through that presentation improper, because what I heard basically was invectives, allegations, without not a lot of backup.
Well, I thought her presentation was very straightforward, and as far as allegations, she read some from the
text messages
indictment, but those are text messages.
Yeah.
That's something different than just a statement in the indictment.
So he's pretty much saying, she was just saying assertions, like it was just kind of not substantiating and proving that. Even the judge was like, hold on, wait a minute. Judge said this. Judge didn't agree. She said, no. You know, she had to step in there and say, wait a minute. No, he said, no, I understand. So there's going to be some comical parts with David Taylor's judge. It's only right that he hire a man that's a little charismatic to defend him,
Go ahead.
But it's clearly that she's not happy with the church. I understand that. But David Taylor is a 53-year-old man with zero criminal history. He has been pastoring and ministering for about 40 years. Way before the allegations.
Wait a minute. He's been pastoring for over 40 years? David Taylor's 53. This man was pastoring since the age of 12 while he was doing shootouts in a gang. This is crazy. Come on, man.
In this case.
So this is going to be the point where he's trying to paint David Taylor as this great guy. He's an upstanding model citizen. So I'll let it play, but just get you a little chuckle.
His message has always been the same, and he's developed that message over time. He's always developed that message with a goal towards starting a Christian school where people can come in exchange for their missionary work, get educated.
Hold on, I got to pause there. Yeah, check out that school, Mr. Lawyer. You didn't do your homework, did you? You didn't do your homework. That school is basically to teach people how to become superheroes. I'm not even embellishing it. Seriously. You can teach yourself how to be. He called it Marvel's Institute. It literally is the name. You can learn how to fly, go through walls, superhuman strength, invisibility. Guys, we have played some of the videos, and it is nuttier than a Snicker bar.
Get housed, get food, get sheltered, and things of that nature. That has been accomplished in Houston.
Just like Colts.
We just supplied the government with a hard drive. So I haven't seen any of the evidence, but since I've been involved in this portion of the case, I have had the opportunity to speak directly and indirectly.
Imagine you're a lawyer. I haven't looked at all the evidence, right? Now, to be fair, I think he's saying, look, I just kind of got involved in the case. Well, you might not want to address those things until you look at it, right?
With a number of witnesses that I believe will absolutely refute most, if not all, of the government's claims, not only specifically, but directly. It's also interesting to point out that David Taylor hasn't been in the Tampa address. Has never been there, has never been in the Houston address. He has been performing a shutaway. And a shutaway is when he goes to a location isolated to prayer.
For years, right?
For years. He's been there for 5 years.
Right, with that stanky couch.
But he's been conducting Zoom sermons and things of that
nature. I know that
from
couch
that location. But he hasn't been in any of those locations. So that contradicts some of the dates that the government has even put in the indictment with respect to some of these alleged victims. Although he has lived there, it's interesting. I listened to the pretrial services report. I listened to him answer the questions as carefully as possible. Sometimes I added information to the pretrial services officer. What we're talking about semantics. If you ask David Taylor where he lives, He maintained a residence in St. Louis almost all his life, an apartment that was up until the time of the indictment when they terminated the lease. If you ask me where I live, I would say St. Louis. But I stay for a frequent period of time in West Palm Beach. That doesn't mean I live there. I was asked that question today. Where do you live? I said St. Louis. That's where I grew up. So to say that that's a falsehood is just inappropriate. When we went through the financial aspect of the case, he was answering those questions, but at the same time, he indicated to some of those questions he doesn't have all the answers. So I just think that's an overreach. And I think it's an overreach, like a lot of the information in the brief is an overreach. With respect to his additional information with respect to whether he would appear, he wants nothing more to appear and defend himself and to vindicate himself and to vindicate the church.
Let me just say, this is a thought I had in passing. It's not going to happen. But imagine David Taylor being released. Can you understand the amount of anger and just like craziness that will actually happen if this man gets released out of prison? Oh my goodness. My goodness.
Forward to a trial. That I can assure you.
Or jail, not prison.
With respect to other factors that would indicate he has no intention of fleeing, this case actually started in December. Let me see. I'm sorry. This case, I was retained initially in August 29th of 2022. And when I was retained initially, it was a financial investigation where the government was serving subpoenas on the church and to other church entities. My king got involved.
The first time.
My king is the church lawyer. Really respected lawyer. That's who they seek guidance from as well. American College of Trial lawyer in the college. He's a fellow in the college, and I coordinated with him with respect to responding to those subpoenas. That was clearly a tax and financial type of investigation. That's where the case started. David Taylor knew he was under investigation. It couldn't have been any more clear. I told him he was under investigation. I told him that most of these cases wind up in indictment. That's where this case started, and he had ample opportunity to flee the jurisdiction. He had a passport at that time, which now he does not. That was seized by the government. He had ample opportunity to leave. At the time, he had ample opportunity, whatever funds he had, but he made no effort because then, as of now, he feels he has done absolutely nothing wrong. With respect to the financial means, I don't even know how to respond to some of that. PayPal, credit cards with a limit of $7,000 are listed. A debit card for $12,000. She mentions a life insurance. I have no idea whether or not that's actually owned by David. I don't know whether that was investigated. But that is not the financial background of somebody that's going to take off to some other country. It just doesn't add up. The government claims...
Use that invisible power, David.
With respect to the pretrial, so he wasn't deceitful. I think that's just another unsubstantiated allegation. So as we get to the factors in a detention hearing under 3142, once this is a detention, this is a burden that I have of production. But that burden under Strickland is not a heavy burden. That's what the case law says. I have to show some evidence to meet the burden. In this case, I have absolutely no doubt I can show evidence. The government talks about witnesses. That was 9, now it's 10. But I didn't hear anything specific that witness A will say that David Taylor did this. Witness B will say that David Taylor actually did this. It seems to be all vague. There's no photographs. There's other options that the government could choose to support this case. They could have had an in-camera proceeding. They could have done initials. They could have done redacted names. We see that all the time. But nothing to support the allegation other than they're out there. We haven't seen it. The corroborating evidence, I don't know what that is. I see some out-of-context text messages. I see what their interpretation of that scripture is. But I know
out-of-context text messages and out-of-context scripture. What context will make it throw water on their faces and wake them up to keep them up at 4 a.m.? What would make that okay, sir? I'm interested to hear the true context to all these text messages. It's going to be an interesting trial.
I know what the church will say that is. This is a church that had...
And by the way, I hope they stream this. This is a fascinating case for a lot of us, right?
Faithful study, strict accordance with the Bible and the scripture in the Bible. And if you dig deep to those passages,
David's
all of those are related to the Bible.
Teachings of the Bible?
Talking about the armor bearers, the general, the way they go about teaching the ministry. It's all guided by the Bible.
No.
All of these congregants. I understand that the government is trying to make their allegation that that his lifelong employment was nothing more than some organized crime.
Cult.
But that just doesn't fly with the facts.
Yes.
It doesn't.
Yes.
that he has a substantial following, about 200,000 people he reaches, all throughout the country. He's located in every state, in all sorts of different countries, where his message of the gospel of Jesus Christ is appreciated and taken in by all these different individuals.
What gospel, sir? What gospel?
How dare you?
There's no gospel David Taylor's preaching that 200,000 appreciate. You know what's going to be an interesting dynamic in the trial is they're probably going to get into some of David Taylor's theology and the marvels and all of that is interesting. Hey, look, y'all could use my content if y'all need clips. I got y'all. I have done literally over 2 years of homework on David Taylor, and this man is nuttier than a Snicker bar. You guys know how he's made here. All right, let's get back to it.
That's just not some fly-by-night con man. That's preposterous.
Preposterous.
He has been doing that for years, and they want to transmute the church into a criminal enterprise. His congregants, his adherents, would certainly take issue with that. And yeah, they're upset.
They're in the cult.
What they saw on August 27th, and it was not only wasn't it pleasant, it was shock and awe, and it was misstated in this courtroom with respect to the one individual they're talking about. And the reason I know that is because I was on the phone with that individual during the raid. And that raid, in my review of this case, a lot of these allegations are primarily being generated by some disgruntled congregants. And we all know that every church at some point has disgruntled congregants.
Yeah, here's the problem. In any church you can go to, they probably have a history of disgruntled congregants, former members. They go on Facebook saying the pastor is heavy shepherding and he's not fit. Whatever, right? He was mean to me because he didn't say hi to me one day in the parking lot, right? Not to belittle those things, right? Everybody. But I have never in my 35 years of living have experienced someone accusing people of all the things they are accusing David Taylor of just because they're disgruntled. Yes, people will lie sometimes, but it's usually something that's not far-fetched. And then it was so big, the FBI found text messages proving some of these stuff. And look, if they got his laptop, man, I mean, FBI checked that laptop. They literally, right? They got the evidence for those claims. So it's a little bit more than disgruntled members, Mr. Lawyer, sir.
We see them on the news shows, the Mormons, the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Scientologists. And the reason I know that is because some of the information and some what she alluded to is tracked specifically back to some of these individuals that were disgruntled.
All cults.
For instance, one individual in 2014 was going through a divorce with one of the congregants. She and her daughter in the courtroom. By proffer, I can tell you that when she gave a substantial amount of money to the church after the divorce, he went ballistic and he started calling the FBI. Yeah. And he went ballistic because he was appalled that she would give her money to a black church with a black minister. And the daughter would testify to that. And the daughter would testify to his bias.
I guess he's trying to make this about like racism, that the man was upset the money was given because of racism. He didn't want to give it to a black man, I guess. That's crazy.
So these people have not been vetted. They have not been vetted in cross-examination. They have not been exposed for their credibility, which we intend to do during the course of the trial. And we think once that's exposed, this case will have a much clearer view of how it started, why it's going on, and why it continues to proceed. And we're looking forward to doing that. Another alleged victim.
He's confident.
Was another individual that left the church, an armor bearer. And an armor bearer is not a servant. An armor bearer, they look to the Bible. And look, I'm no theologian. I have to listen to the people involved in this church to educate me.
Sir, that's your first problem, sir. That's your first problem.
An armor bearer is specifically mentioned in the Bible as an assistant. There's nothing unusual about that. There's nothing Machiavellian. There's nothing.
Look, I'm not going to get into the theology of an armor bearer right now, but I know for certain in a lot of cases of how the armor bearer is practiced, it is a glorified slave in the church. They go get the pastor's water. They put his jacket on for him. I mean, they are his butler and servant. But again, that's another time for another day.
The lecherous. They want to make it so, but it's not. And we have all of these individuals that will say it's not. The interesting thing, the reason I know that they're relying on some false information, is when the FBI did search the Tampa property August 27th, and that can be deemed nothing less than a raid. They corralled all the individuals up. They handcuffed them, some tight, some complaining. Didn't necessarily tell these individuals why they were being taken into custody. And for what purpose? They led him to a hospital. Once they led him to the hospital, they started trying to interrogate him. And these people, most of them, a lot of them, were there visiting from the Houston complex. And by the way, the Houston complex is a converted hotel with nice hotel rooms on the top, their call centers on the bottom, and I'll speak a little bit about the call centers in a moment. Once they were hoarded into the hotel, the individual that she is referring to called me because he knew I was David's lawyer and had really no clue what was going on other than saying we're handcuffed, they're taking our phones, they won't let us go back to the Tampa residence. I don't know what's going on. But what's interesting and what tells me that these facts are not correct is that this individual was literally the last person to leave the Tampa residence and the first person to leave the hospital. He interacted or had time with the other individuals for maybe 10 or 15 minutes. He never said anything to them except maybe answer some questions like what's going on. So it would have been an impossibility for him to have done what the government just claimed that he did. Literally an impossibility. But what even is more telling, and why I understand that this information is being provided by disgruntled sources, is when these individuals got to the hospital, the government and the victim services were all ready with all sorts of gift bags for a lot of, like up to 20 minor children. 20 minor children with different sizes of clothes in bags. Apparently their information was there was minor children at the Tampa residence. There have never been minor children living at that residence. There was no children there that day. That was just information that they relied on by disgruntled individuals to move this theory along. And it was just dead wrong. Never been. And the minor children never have been in call centers. And I don't know how they're being interviewed. I don't know whether a CAC is involved. I don't know. I certainly wouldn't trust the FBI to interview children without the proper forensic training. So I don't know what's going on there. But I know that there's a lot of bias going on in this case, starting with some of these disgruntled witnesses. And 1,000 Frenchmen can't be wrong. There are thousands of people. Yes, they love David Taylor. Why? Because they look to him for their spiritual guidance. That's what they do. And that's freedom of religion, Your Honor. She may not like it. I may not understand it. But they do. And they go strictly by the Bible. Some of the religions do other stuff that I may not understand. But that's not what we're here about. That's called the freedom of religion. That's called the First Amendment. Plain and simple. So I think one of the things that's very telling is of the whatever the number was, approximately the 57 or so people that were hoarded up and taken to this hospital after the search warrant on August 27th. All of them, given the opportunity, returned and stayed and wanted to go back to what they were doing because that's what they want to do. That's where they wanted to seek their guidance from David Taylor, their minister, who they looked to for that spiritual paddle. One took the opportunity to take the government at its largesse and fly to Canada to see family, and then turned around and flew back and came back to the church. Two had high blood pressure and PTSD, stayed in the hospital for a period of time, then came back. These people are free will. They can come and go as they please. And that has always been
Yeah, you can come and go as you please, but your food has been rationed. You don't get no water. All your money's gone. But yeah, you can go if you want,
consistent. They had access to cars. They had access to medical care. They would drive for their doctor's appointments in cars provided and then come back. There is a misunderstanding of what's going on in this church, a gross misunderstanding because somebody or some people in the government haven't taken enough time to really drill down and learn what is going on here. Because if they did, they would find out that David Taylor had a vision. And one of the visions is to provide a place where he can teach ministry. When you hear about his methods of teaching, he can point out the actual portions of the Bible where he adopted those practices from. Literally.
Yeah, I would love to see that. And we've gone over a lot of the theology of David Taylor of, things like the bejeweled Jesus or the Father or what else crazy theology David Taylor has. Oh, that God will kill for David Taylor. That David Taylor is literally God's best friend. That Jesus appeared to David Taylor because he was crying so much because he doesn't have any friends. And David Taylor, the humble prophet and apostle, said, "I'll be your friend, Jesus." I mean, the theology of David Taylor is crazy.
And he's employed them and he teaches them. And it's been productive. It's been incredibly productive. Maybe there's some offense that he was able to go into all these countries and these states. But he did so because his methods were working. In fact, other ministers would come and train with him. And the basis of the training, and what can be tough sometimes with the training, is to make sure to provide them, if you make it, the ministers for the long term, because so many ministers are dropping out. These people came back because this is their church, this is where they want to be. With respect to these allegations and accusations of forced labor, and you can't, and no food, and starving, that's just not true. We have dozens of witnesses to contradict that. Dozens. Now, were there times where you would fast? Sure, but it was controlled, and it was purposeful, and it was within an 8-hour. Also, times when you would sleep, and it would be in that.
Yeah, but show us where you are making someone fast, one, and making them fast because they didn't perform the actions or the duties you want them to. So, I mean, there's a bit of a difference between that and fasting, sir.
Contextually, whether or not it was a committee or a portion on the media team that had to get a project out. That's not unlike any dorm. And where they're not living on top of each other. They were living in Tampa. There was 12 bathrooms and rooms that people had. There was one allegation that David Gwynn, his armor bearer in North Carolina, and David Gwynn is his friend. He was accurate about that. And he's not sleeping. He's not sleeping on an air mattress. That's just wrong. He's sleeping in a bed. There's a cabin attached to a church. The church is owned by Pastor Adon. He's in the courtroom. It's not owned by the church. It's not uncommon for pastors to go back and forth as guest pastors. That happens in every religion. It happens in Catholicism. It happens in Christianity. It happens in Judaism. It happens all the time. There's nothing nefarious about that. They can't make every innocent conduct and turn it into something nefarious. It just doesn't work like that. So when you go, the twisting and the contorting to come up to this conclusion, I can just say I'm looking forward to exposing it on cross-examination, and I feel confident that I will.
The confidence.
We've heard a lot about the call centers and where the money went, and that's another gross overstatement. Let me tell you about the call centers. Churches don't run themselves. There's overhead. And there's overhead when you're taking in missionaries and students and pupils and volunteers, and you're providing them with complete education. Now, you may not like the education. They may not like the education, but these people are yearning for this particular type of education. They want to learn how to minister, and they want
to be a Marvel superhero. Again, we've talked about the school before. We've made review of the Marvel Institute. Anybody paying for that, God bless them, right? That's all I'll say.
Be taught by David Taylor, and he's arranged it so that they can. Their room, their board, their upkeep is all provided. Everything is provided. If you equate that to a first-year college education, that's $50,000, $60,000. The money has to come from somewhere. But again, if you do a deep dive on these call centers, you can see two things, which has made this ministry so successful. They're not just calling asking for donations. They're trained. They don't show up at a door and say, I want to stay here, and get on a phone in an untrained manner. Before they take phone calls, and there's 60,000 phone calls that they've taken, they are trained in administering prayer, in listening, in giving people an opportunity to talk about their suicidal ideations, to confront those types of issues. And they do that for an unlimited period of time. Because David Taylor instructs that I don't want you just talking to people for 2 minutes on the phone and get off. I want you to give them time to express. Now, not everybody's the same. And did some people get rebuked, again, a church term, because they were either lazy or because they were there for a free ride? Absolutely. But there was never any physical violence. Never. And you won't see a picture of it. You won't see a recording of it. You won't see any evidence to support that. The call centers mostly generated money to run the church. But to say, baselessly, that it generated all the money for David Taylor is, quite frankly, ludicrous. This church would take, trips to different countries with a number of these pupils and volunteers, to Israel, to all these places, to spread the gospel. That takes money. This church provided charity. They owned 2 18-wheeler trucks that provided food and comfort to victims of Hurricane Beryl in Houston. They provide outreach, all sorts of outreach for human trafficking. They keep their doors open for hurricane victims that couldn't support even after they delivered on the trucks. They have community miracle caravans, trucks that they didn't seize, little pickup trucks that they go into the community. So to say this, I can't sit here and just listen to accusations that aren't grounded in fact. It's just not appropriate. And they weren't. They just weren't. By the way, I'm not playing with my phone. I just got a new set of hearing aids. I don't know how to work them. I don't know how to make them turn off when I'm talking.
That's okay, as long as we don't hear it ringing.
David Taylor's lawyer is deaf. I mean, this is going to be a crazy trial. Like, David Taylor hired the most. I thought that was interesting when I heard it. It's like, man, his lawyer needs some of that Marvelic power of David Taylor's. I mean, if this guy had the abilities he claimed, he could just poof out of there, right? I mean, my goodness.
So when we're dealing also with respect to these call centers, you have to understand the context. And the context is this started in COVID, and that's when David went to the shutaway during COVID. And he stopped being able to use some of the public platforms because of COVID. But again, when the government says he has no ties to Michigan, one of his largest church where he would give sermons is in the heart of Michigan. And he would
Taylor, Michigan.
preach
Y'all
from
remember
there
that one? Taylor.
frequently.
David Taylor, you know.
Also with respect to the expenses and this alleged money laundering, the church has a recognized board of directors, and every expense is approved through the board of directors, these types of expenses. The board of director has a lawyer, again, Mike King, a church lawyer, who guides and directs the church as to appropriate conduct and the appropriate charitable deductions and things of that nature. So this is not some sham organization. This is a highly structured organization where he is a minister to people that are living and practicing his strict interpretation of the scripture. And frankly, again, that's the First Amendment. Whether or not the government likes it, and whether or not there's 9 or 10 very disgruntled people that want to take David Taylor down for their own reasons, which I promise you will be exposed. During these missionary houses, to hear the government, you would think that they're all piled in there doing nothing except making phone call after phone call. That's just not accurate. You'll hear, I would present evidence that they're engaged in Bible studies, they're engaged in learning, they're engaged in tutoring. It's almost like akin to a college dorm, learning to then answer the phones so that they can pass on the message. And they can
Scam other people.
They can be beneficial to a lot of these individuals in a time of need that need to talk to somebody. And that's what they do. There's, again, nothing nefarious. There's not one individual that was denied medical attention. Not one. They were free to come and go. We have a number of examples of people that would leave and go visit their family and then come back. The portrait that has been painted is just not accurate. Then she throws in the salacious stuff about the sex. And all I heard about that was, well, if he asked if there was a nude video discovered, then that must be he can't control his impulses. I don't know what study that is, and I don't know how that's some uncontrollable impulse or danger. The man was living in a shut-in for 5 years. And in a deeper dive of these instances, all of these were consensual relationships from and by adult people, both of which were single. One of which is single and, in his way, going through a process to try to find a lifelong partner. And it's difficult for him to date. But that's what his version of dating is. These are not just, hey, give me some nude pictures. These are types of relationships. Now, they may not be approved by the government, but there's nothing illegal about it. And there'll be nothing when the vetting is done to suggest that it was forceful at all. When you talk about the threats, the one threat I heard that I had to take particular attention to is there'd be threats of damnation. And again, I'm no theologian, but I think in every religion there's a threat of damnation if you...
Yeah, but David Taylor would particularly use the doctrine of hell to threaten people, yes, even his own members, definitely people outside, that if you disagree with David Taylor, you're going to hell. You're going to experience the wrath of God. So it's not just, oh, if you don't believe in Christ. No, it was David Taylor's message. Him. And I'm not just talking about the stuff Bible teaches. I'm talking about the whacking doodle stuff. I mean, we have plenty of David Taylor's drug-filled rants.
Don't follow the Bible, or you don't follow the tenets of the religion. That's nothing new to this church. The text messages are all out of context, but when they, again, are really curated and looked at, they all come from the Bible. contextually. Taken out of context, you can spin it any way you want. But taken back into context, especially with the other accompanying testimony, we can reveal them for exactly what they are. You know, the thing, I have to take issue with just some of the statements made, where in the government's brief it says that Pastor Taylor, over a decade, pretending to be a religious renunciate and scamming people. That's just not fair.
Yeah, it is.
What does that mean? Pretending? Was he pretending for 40 years of his life?
Yeah.
And that apparently as a teenager, he said he was a bad dude? There's no charges. A bad dude? He also said that he hadn't even smoked weed since he was 16 or 17. How many of us can say that?
That would crack me up, sir.
What'd you say now, Chuck?
He's like, he ain't smoked weed till 16. How could he be a bad guy? Remember, he's been pastor for over 40 years. So he was 13 pastoring gun shootouts and smoking weed. This is crazy. This is crazy. I thought that was a pretty funny line. All right, we'll keep listening.
He went into the ministry at a very young age and stayed there because that's his calling, and that's still his calling. Sometimes when you believe in and when you follow the scripture, and when people are rebuked for not following the scripture.
Yes.
I read a quote by Christopher Hitchens. The Bible mandates compulsory love and grotesque fear simultaneously. You can reject it, but if you accept it, you accept it all.
Why is he quoting an atheist, Christopher Hitchens, to justify David Taylor's behavior? It's crazy.
In this church, they never preach violence. They preach the Bible.
Oh, yes, they did. Yes, they did preach violence.
It's forgiving and loving, but it's also demanding. And all of these constituents know that, and that's their belief. No matter whose belief it's not. Frankly, this case scares me a little bit. It does.
Me too.
It shouldn't be. And we're looking forward to litigating this case. Litigating it for David, litigating it for the church, exposing how it came to be, and exposing what David Taylor's mission is. He deserves that. With this, as far as the conditions, he's not a danger to anybody. His whole life's been this church. So are you going to say that he can't? I get it. If there is it's hard to know who the victims are because we don't know. There's no way to identify them.
Okay, that's not funny. Stop. Go ahead.
Whoa.
But clearly, he won't go around.
So someone in the courtroom was laughing and the judge had to shut that down. Wow.
On any alleged victims. That's perfectly reasonable. He doesn't need to go back to the Tampa residence or the Houston residence. He can find a...
Where do you propose he go?
Well, he can go in Michigan. I was given an address that his son has vetted. Right now, it would be an Airbnb that's available for a month, but potentially if this would occur, we can get it for a longer period of time. So he can stay in this district. He can absolutely stay in North Carolina. What he's doing in North Carolina is he's writing. He's authored about somewhere between 300 to 500 textbooks for a school that he's planning that's currently going on in Houston.
I would love to see those 300 or 500 textbooks of David Taylor's for this Marvel Institute. That is fascinating.
For a curriculum. He's not up to no good. He's writing and praying. And in his religion, being in a shut-in is a way to get closer to Jesus Christ and God.
It's false.
That's what the man's doing right
Bible
now.
doesn't
sound
that.
too dangerous to me. And with respect to who these individuals are, again, Pastor Adon, he is not connected to the church. They have visiting relationships back and forth, like is common in almost all religions. Daniel Gwynn is in court. You can call him an armor bearer, which is what the Bible calls him, or you can call him an assistant. Again, not unusual. Nobody questions the Pope's assistants. Nobody questions the Mormons' assistants. They just don't. They don't like the phraseology? Says who? He's not a danger. He's certainly not a threat to leave. He wants nothing more to face this. So with respect to contact to other witnesses, I get it. That's reasonable. With respect to denying him the ability to at least go online and continue his sermons in a restricted fashion. I would even propose that if he uploads a YouTube video, something he's been doing all his life, or YouTube or Zoom, that he clears the content with pretrial services, that he's not talking about his situation, that he's not talking about the court case, He's not talking about anything except the gospel, which he's done all his life. And people rely on that.
No, he
Why
does not
remove
talk
that?
about that.
Who are you hurting then? All these people that believe in this church and this man because they don't? Certainly there's conditions or a combination of conditions that will satisfy this court that he's not a threat to leave, that he'll be here to defend himself, and he's not a danger to himself or to anyone else. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Does the government have any?
All right, so his lawyer spoke for quite a bit, right? Now this is the judge kind of going to be giving her determination of what she thinks, given that both sides have spoken. So let's talk about it. We'll wrap it up.
Rebuttal. And I'm particularly interested in, if he were to be released on bond, where would he go, and would you be comfortable with any place that he might be going where he would not pose a danger?
The answer is unequivocally no.
Can't let
There
him.
has been no
Can't let him out.
proposed address.
Well, there have been, Your Honor.
Well, I understand what's in the pretrial services report. Okay.
And I provided the pretrial services officer with another address after our meeting today.
Okay.
If I had been allowed to finish my sentence, the sentence was going to be, there's been no proposed address in this district where David Taylor will live alone. And even if that was proposed, he has no money outside of the organization to fund that house. And because of all the reasons in the government's brief and the argument today, the government submits that David Taylor, even living alone, even in the Eastern District of Michigan, is a danger.
Because he is the leader.
Because he is the leader, because of all of the facts of this criminal activity.
Hear what the judge is
because
saying?
Of his overwhelming, coercive, and threatening and terrorizing behavior for over a decade.
Guys, this is what the judge is saying about David Taylor. I don't think this trial it's not starting off good for David Taylor, that this is already being said about him.
And I want to emphasize a couple of points and correct the record with regard to just a couple of things, Your Honor. First of all,
sorry. I do apologize. That was the lawyer, not the judge. So I do apologize. But she is going to say similar things. But let's listen.
the court understands this, but for purposes of the record, the organization has sought for decades money from individuals without informing those individuals the nature of this criminal organization. So the emphasis on the organization's reach to hundreds of thousands of people emphasizes the danger of that criminal organization and the danger of it continuing, because donors are not informed of the nature of this organization, the victimization that has occurred, and that the government submits remains occurring. Whether members admit that they're victims or not, they are victims of David Taylor and Michelle Brannett.
Right.
I want to clarify for the record with regard to the number of people that the evidence currently shows have assaulted other members within the organization. If the government was unclear, I apologize, so I'm clarifying now. There are substantive counts in the indictment with regard to victims, and that number is as the defense counsel stated. The government's argument today is that the evidence thus far has established that approximately 10 members of the organization, including David Taylor and Michelle Brannett, have assaulted other individuals in the organization, including
minors.
A minor that has come forward recently.
So essentially, people were being physically beaten in the church, not just by David Taylor, but by other higher ranking members. That's why I tell you, this is wild. More stuff is being uncovered.
With regard to the sexual material that the government is uncovering, the government will make it perfectly clear that the government is not infringing upon an adult's desire and acts in furtherance of that desire that is consensual and between consensual adults. The danger here is that, one, the defendant was coercing the individuals and, in fact, grooming individuals to either subject themselves to this or to eventually succumb to David Taylor's coercion and needs for this kind of information. And the evidence is also suggesting at this time, and I've told defense counsel it's an ongoing investigation, is suggesting that the women who are providing these videos to David Taylor at his demand are providing it as part of their forced labor. Just as they were forced to make calls, just as they were forced to raise money, David Taylor required that they provide sexual material to him. So it was part of their forced labor. And the government is not going to put a number on it today. And I've told defense counsel that's an ongoing investigation. But in light of that ongoing investigation, in light of the material that we have uncovered, and in light of the messages that David Taylor has sent to these women that we are now reading, he's unquestionably a danger to the community and specifically to the women that he coerced into sending this material to him. So for all of those reasons and the reasons cited in the brief, the government submits to this court that David Taylor unquestionably is a danger to the community and a risk of flight.
Thank you. The court will take a brief recess and come back with its decision. Thank you.
All right, let's hear the decision.
Recalling case 25-20560, United States of America versus David Taylor.
All right, so now the first voice that you should be hearing now should be the judge now.
Sarah Cohen, on behalf of the United States.
Thank you. Just put your appearance again on the record, please.
Oh, Scott Rosenblum. I'm sorry. I was just getting notes for what you're going to say.
Oh, okay. All right. Mr. Taylor, I'm going to say some things that the folks in this courtroom have probably heard a couple more times today, but it is part of my decision-making process. And the first thing is you are entitled to the presumption of innocence. There is nothing that has taken place in this hearing today, anything that was in the government's proffer, its memorandum, or anything that I might set forth in any finding that's intended or should affect that presumption of your innocence. And this is a detention hearing, and it's governed by the Bail Reform Act. And that act says that detention is considered an exceptional step. Bond is presumed unless it is determined that there are no conditions or combination of conditions that will reasonably assure your appearance or reasonably assure the safety of the community. And the act requires that I impose the least restrictive measures to provide those reasonable assurances. Now, in your case, with the charges that you are facing, it is a presumption case. And that means that these charges are so serious by their very nature that Congress has decided that it is presumed you don't get bond. But as your lawyer said, that presumption can be overcome. And I understand the government has a belief that they haven't overcome the presumption, but you just need some evidence to overcome it. You don't have a criminal history, and you have ties to varying communities. So I'm going to assume that you have overcome the presumption of detention. But then I have to look to the 3142G factors. They were all talked about here today in some way, shape, or another, and they're in the government's brief, and they're talked about in the brief that was filed by your lawyer. The first is the nature and circumstances of the offense. It's laid out in the indictment. It's very serious. These allegations are horrific. I understand that this is ostensibly a church, but from where the court sees it, it has serious questions. If churches that I know don't operate in this manner.
She's like, I don't know no church like this. What church? Where they do that at? Right.
This is a presumption case, and so this factor, the nature and circumstances of the offense, and I understand you have telling me a formidable defense to what is laid out in the indictment and the nature and circumstances. But what I'm looking at, it's serious. It weighs in favor of detention. Then I consider the weight of the evidence. It's not the.
So essentially what she just said is David Taylor going to stay in jail till the court case, right? And the determination of the conviction or not to be convicted. So he's getting no bond. That's what she said. All that meant that, right?
Weight of the evidence of your guilt or innocence. It's the weight of the evidence as to your risk of non-appearance or danger to the community. And as to your risk of non-appearance, the government has set forth.
And the reason why they said no bond is they's like, we don't really believe you'll come back if we let you out.
Here today and in its memorandum, that you have some financial means potentially. I don't know if it's super significant for you to go a lot of places, but what's really concerning about me is that you have ties so many different places in so many different states, and you have supporters. I'm hearing, 200,000 people, and that gives me some concern that you are a risk of non-appearance through your ties and your supporters, and they only have to convince me by a preponderance of the evidence, and they've come really close to that. But I'm mostly concerned about the danger to the community, and they have to show clear and convincing evidence. And I look at what's set forth in the affidavit. Those aren't just, there's allegations, yes, but there's actual text messages that are set forth that enhance what's in the affidavit. And then I heard in the government's proffer today, and I understand this is an ongoing investigation and they are still uncovering things. And the things that they have told me today that they have uncovered are very concerning, very disturbing, and indicative of your dangerousness. And I think your history and characteristics as well. You don't have a criminal history. And by your lawyer, you've been, serving in this ministry, and you have supporters here who believe in you. And, that would be a good thing in your favor, but it also cuts the other way too, because what's laid out here in this indictment and what I've read is really concerning, Mr. Taylor. You are alleged to lead this organization that is alleged to have engaged in some activity that is incredibly troubling, concerning to the court. So I think this all speaks to your dangerousness to the community, and I know your supporters completely disagree, but you don't have all just supporters. There are people who, you're going to have your witnesses at trial that say none of this happened. They're going to have their people that tell a very different story, and that's not unusual in situations like this.
Right.
But from my vantage point, I'm extremely concerned. I'm also really concerned because there's no real good place right now for me to tell you where you could go, where you would be. No, you let me talk.
Ooh.
You've talked. I know you
Silence.
proposed an address in this district that hasn't been vetted by pretrial services. I have no idea where that is. You don't have, you have some ties to this district. There was a church place here. But I'm not convinced that anything pretrial services has offered. I think one of the bond conditions of your co-defendant was to be completely separated from the church. I don't think that's possible here. I don't think there's any bond condition where you're proposing to live in North Carolina. That's still part of this whole organization. That's still part of it. And your supporters, if I understand what the government's saying in their investigation, part of that is to protect Mr. Taylor. And I don't know how the extent that protection might go. But, Mr. Taylor, I think the only way I can keep the community safe and, to separate you from this organization, that's the only bond condition I could think, that would I could possibly consider. I don't know how to do it at this point. And bond requires trust. And, you say that, there's some discrepancies in the pretrial services report. But for me, I could see that you weren't completely forthcoming with the pretrial services officer. And
essentially what she's saying to David is,
why you always lying?
That he's been lying. The pretrial services, I guess they get interviewed and have to ask questionnaires or whatever. He was lying all through there. I mean, just like his sermons, right?
And I have a problem with that. That's your opportunity. And it doesn't appear that you were fully transparent. These allegations, what the government said in its proffer, I understand that the co-defendant, that individual did get bond, but I think these supporters heard, earlier in the case before this. I look at the cases individually, and your particular role, these particular allegations, what the government has said in its proffer, I do not believe, and I understand that we've got 2 pretrial services report that recommended bond with conditions, but from my vantage point, I do not believe that any of those conditions are sufficient to really assure your appearance and assure the safety of the community. And I know this ruling will come as a great disappointment to all of you who are sitting there, who are supportive of this, but that's my decision, and I'm going to enter an order that keeps you in custody pending the resolution of your case. You do have a right to appeal. I fully expect that you will. No matter what my decision was today, somebody was going to appeal. And to that end, I have been informed that Judge Berg has Tuesday, October 21st at 9 o'clock available should there be an appeal that needs to be heard.
We'll take that date.
Well, you'll have to take it up with them. But, your lawyer did a good job on your behalf. I just happened to disagree with him on the arguments that he made. And I agree with the government on this one. That
yeah, well, that's it, folks. That is the bond hearing of David Taylor. We'll be interested to see where this case develops. Look, I think that judge is like, look, I already ready for this guilty verdict. I've seen some of the evidence. That's my kind of like, she's frustrated with David Taylor and his lawyer. I think she kind of already sees that this man is a dangerous man, a threat, cult leader, all those things. So it'll be interesting to see. What do you guys think will be the verdict? Again, David does deserve a fair trial. Everybody does. So we will await his innocence or guilt. But, you know, people have their speculations. So that's what I'm asking right now. And also, would you like me to keep up with this trial or just kind of like, yeah, whatever. But let me know in the comment sections, guys. Thank you for watching. It was a long one. Hope you enjoyed the video. Till the next time, grace and peace. Yo, thank you for watching another video. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Let's talk about it below. As always, like this video, subscribe to the channel if you're not. And as always, till the next time, grace and peace.